What's up, welcome back, Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of Beef Season 2 out in full on Netflix. Of course, Beef Season 1 back in 2023 was one of the biggest surprises of the television year, truly coming out of nowhere from creator Lee Sung-jin, starring Ali Wong and Steven Yeun. Season 1 ran it up at the Emmys, winning Best Limited Series, Wong and Yeun both winning Best Actor and Best Actress. And then, due to the immense popularity on Netflix, in addition to that critical reception, Beef became an anthology series, and 3 years later, here we are with Season 2. Beef Season 1 certainly had a notable cast. Of course, Steven Yeun had a strong reputation as an actor. It's certainly one of his best credits at this point, but Ali Wong really established herself as a dramatic figure with that performance. A strong performance from Ashley Park, breakout performance from Young Mizuno. It was a good cast for sure. But Beef Season 2 has certainly stepped it up a notch. We just have a lot more star power involved this time around. Front and center, of course, we have Oscar Isaac and Carey Mulligan playing this couple who work at a wealthy country club in California. This is not Oscar Isaac's first time doing a TV series about a marriage that's coming apart. Of course, look back to Scenes from a Marriage on HBO with Jessica Chastain a few years ago, and Carey Mulligan has also done a Netflix series before with Collateral. Of course, both of them still are movie stars first and foremost. And then opposite them, we have a younger couple who also work at the country club, played by Cailee Spaeny and Charles Melton. This is the first big role for Charles Melton since he broke out with Todd Haynes' May-December on Netflix a few years ago. And Cailee Spaeny at this point is one of the most prolific actors of her generation at this point, just continues to crush with big and high-profile roles and projects. But the cast doesn't stop there. We also have Yuh-jung with another performance for a Hollywood project. William Fichtner is here, a smaller role for Kang-ho, one of the greatest actors out of Korea. Despite a significantly deeper cast this time around, Beef Season 2 surprised me for how it's different from its predecessor. Beef Season 1 was a lot more straightforward, with an inciting incident of road rage catapulting a series of destructive behavior from all the characters involved. The drama with Season 2 is a lot less straightforward. Ultimately, it progresses as a slow and steady burn as one couple tries to blackmail the other. Cailee Spaeny and Charles Melton play a young couple working at a country club without much station or momentum in their lives, and that's directly contrast with Oscar Isaac and Carey Mulligan, who work at the highest echelon at said club. There is a through line between the two seasons, though, what pushes a character to reveal the worst impulses and aspects of themselves when they get more desperate about things in their life. That's still pretty consistent. Season 2 also introduces greater class commentary, the topic of racial identity, and those threads are not explored as much as they could have been, but there's still enough there to be satisfied. Season 2 didn't have nearly the same level of tension as the first season. As the characters start jet setting and the plot really picks up, I was waiting for an extra level that just never materialized. I gotta say, this is one of the best examples yet of why the Netflix binge release model is so brutal. I mean, 8 episodes here of a significant dramatic series. I mean, Beef Season 1 was a big hit for Netflix. Its early going suggests maybe Season 2 won't quite be as popular. We'll see how that plays out. But the fact that this is not a more spread out release is just a huge bummer, because there is a lot of substance, throughout this season and throughout these episodes. There's plenty to chew on. Now, if I have a gripe with Season 2, which I did enjoy, I think it's still well done. It took me a while to grapple with how different this was from the first season. And if I have a overarching note, I just don't think the characters are quite as compelling this time around. And, part of this is you've added more characters, right? This is truly like a four-hander type story where both aspects of the two couples are front and center with the storytelling here, versus with Beef Season 1, it was really Ali Wong and Steven Yeun forward and their spouses and whatnot, still quite secondary. Cailee Spaeny's Ashley, though, is a tough hang, and as the season progresses, that hang only gets tougher. And you contrast that with Charles Melton's Austin, who in the beginning is an incredibly rough sit as well. It's a bit hard to empathize with what's going on. In the beginning, right? These people, they work for a country club in, nondescript, more laborious job, nothing glamorous by any means. Austin's not even working there full time. They don't have health insurance. You understand where they're coming from. And the initial hook of that first episode, where by sheer chance, they end up coming across Oscar Isaac's Josh and Carey Mulligan's Lindsay having an argument in the privacy of their own home, but having one. As the quick-thinking Gen Z that they are, they decide to film the altercation. And when they look back at that video, it does make the fight that we were watching from that POV beforehand, it does make the fight look incredibly grim and truly like a difficult domestic violence situation, which it really wasn't, as you watch it play out in the moment. It was truly a equal opportunity fight between both parties as you're watching it, and the characters rationalize that and talk about that. But before we know it, they're being blackmailed by people that they barely know who work under them, right? Of course, Josh is the general manager of this wealthy country club out in California, and his wife does a lot of the interior decorating and has a role of some status as well in the process. We're talking like a truly like exclusive, expensive club for, truly wealthy elites. They do, I think, a amusing job of getting some celebrity cameos to fill in to, color that world, right? Of course, we see Benny Blanco and Michael Phelps, Baron Davis. Later in the season, Suni Lee shows up, perhaps planning to join the club. We see a picture of Josh next to Alex Rodriguez on a desk somewhere. And what I think is funny about the pace of the season and the point of view that we get is they don't try and like blackmail the living shit out of, Josh and Lindsay. They just want to get a little bit more bang for their buck as employees. Ashley gets bumped up to a salary of, I believe it was $47,500, and gets health insurance in the process. And certainly a big substantial jump for them given their situation, but not a massive ask overall. And Austin does point that out. And you would think, based on how Beef Season 1 went, that maybe we're going to see this increasing escalation as like things go back and forth. You even read like blurbs about the season. You read what it says on Netflix. It's suggesting this to be this rising battle as these two couples go at each other. And it really doesn't become that. And yes, there's some rising tension and things play out. There's a whole subplot where Josh and Lindsay's dog gets killed by a coyote because Ashley accidentally lets it out of the house when she's trying to do some kind of innocuous mischief to get back at them. It's not nearly as violent and destructive on its surface. The titular Beef is, anyway. But the show's able to fill that time because there's a lot of relationship stuff to handle with these two couples. Josh and Lindsay ultimately deciding to get divorced after things kind of spiral and, long-running tensions between their marriage simmer up. Meanwhile, Ashley and Austin begin to see each other in at least slightly different lights as they gain more experience out of this ordeal. But the big reason this is different is because Beef Season 2 has this whole other subplot to it. The owner of the country club, Chairwoman Park, played by Yuh-jung, comes over from South Korea and visits the club and is starting to take a more hands-on approach to the property that they own. And what follows is this somewhat elaborate, series of schemes that involve the core characters we've already met. I was a bit surprised with how much of a cartoony, like, supervillain Chairwoman Park is made out to be. Her husband of convenience, of casual vibes, basically, not a true marriage of love, as we come to learn. That husband, Dr. Kim, is played by Kang-ho, and frankly, a really overqualified performance. He only gets one real big scene, certainly a small role overall, but he ends up accidentally killing someone on the operating table. As a result, Park and her henchmen decide to use the club, use Josh's role as the leader of the club to basically launder money to pull off bribes to, accomplish covering up said death, things like that. It's quite elaborate. I think there's a lot there. I thought all that was pretty straightforward. I don't think there was like too much extra stuff there. Ultimately, I think the true concern of Beef Season 2 was these two relationships, these two couples, and how they grow over the course of the season. And, we get introduced to some class commentary, particularly early on, where, Ashley and Austin feel at least some kind of entitlement or at least acknowledgement of the fact that they feel like disenfranchised young people under the boot of, late stage capitalism. Like, that comes up, and you see the other side of that with like William Fichtner, who plays a member of the club who's just a really obnoxious, wealthy person who flaunts his wealth, like many of the other people who attend said club. And there doesn't end up being like enough of a through line for me with that class thought. Like it's brought up in the hospital, the topic of health insurance. Ashley is we learn is not someone with a deep education, doesn't even have a high school diploma, so things like deductibles with health insurance she doesn't understand. And you kind of contrast that with as she gets some more station throughout the season, as she gets a bigger role at the country club as a token of goodwill from Josh when to not expose the video. Her behavior starts to change. Again, though, like she's never really a likable person because she comes across as not the most, witty person ever. And then that entitlement gets incredibly grating when she starts kind of acting a fool as the season progresses. Meanwhile, Austin is kind of the reverse, where Austin is, an unmotivated person, or maybe a lost person, hard to say, not working full time, not really doing much to play his part in that relationship that they have. They want to get married, they want to have kids, and he starts to see things differently in the relationship as all these events happen. Charles Melton is, of course, of mixed race descent, and once all these other Korean characters come into the fold, he starts to think about himself, his status, a bit differently. The show does a job of pointing out that, Charles Melton used to get mistaken for Mexicans when he lived down south, and Oscar Isaac's Josh also gets mistaken for being of a different race as well. Like, that comes up, but it didn't feel like it necessarily was picked up and continued. Or at least, like, none of that was really like a chief concern for the story. I think there was just so much plot to service, especially once most of the characters make their way over to Seoul, South Korea, and the plot really picks up from there. I just don't know if there was some like grand conclusion that really came together for me. I really like the character of Eunice, played by Soyeon Jang, who's most well known as a K-drama actor. This is my first time seeing her. She plays Chairwoman Park's translator and executive assistant type person. And, her relationship with Austin, I wanted more of that, frankly. I was expecting like a last scene with Eunice that we just don't get, honestly. Matthew Kim plays Woosh, who becomes a tennis pro at the club and is kind of the front for this, skincare / plastic surgery scheme that the Parks are running. And I was not familiar with him either. He actually has a K-pop background. I did think he was pretty charming in the few scenes he did have. Michaela Hoover, who we just saw in Superman last year, also had an amusing role as William Fichtner's character's much younger wife at the club. Even though I thought the character was pretty cartoony, I did like seeing Yuh-jung here, just because this is only, I believe, her fourth project that's of any Hollywood association following the Minari breakout, so it's certainly welcome. I just kind of wish the character was a little more interesting than it ended up being. Song Kang-ho doesn't have really a whole lot to do there. Charles Melton, though, this is definitely like that first big role since May-December. I mean, he had a really great supporting role in Warfare last year, but, he definitely, I think, showed a lot with this role. He has to play someone who's a bit dumb, or a bit dim anyway, a bit in over his head throughout much of the season, but has a heart of sorts. And Cailee Spaeny, I think, deserves a lot of credit because she has to play someone who's not likable with a lot of specificity, and she ends up doing it. Carey Mulligan, she always has had like a really stately presence to her, and I think the Lindsay character is also someone who you go through ups and downs with in terms of whether you're rooting for her or not, just in the same way that Josh has similar ups and downs. And I think they want, Lee Sung Jim, the creators, the writers, they want this to come across as gray and messy, and it certainly is. And I think the bigger themes maybe don't come across as quite as big as I was perhaps thinking they might when they were first introduced. But yeah, it was certainly a different season than the first season, and I think that's pretty cool, honestly. If you're going to make an anthology series, you're going to go back to the well in a certain respect. Why not switch it up? And I think they certainly switched it up plenty. And I'll be really curious how this is received overall, just because that first season was such a, lightning in a bottle type thing 3 years ago. Obviously, the Netflix effect, eyeballs will be on this show, but how will people talk about how people think about it? Will people judge it on its own merits? Will they compare it back to that first season? We'll see. Let me know, though. What did you think of Beef Season 2? What did you like about this version? Did you like these changes? What acting performance did you like the most? Let me know. And for more TV reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time.